Hiking is a great way to get out of the house and be active, but with the amount of people on hiking trails, especially popular locations like state parks increasing, are people starting to have negative effects on the trails and the surrounding environment? Well, the short answer is yes. Hiking can affect the surrounding environment in many ways.
When it comes to hiking, I feel that it is beneficial. Mainly because the more folks that get to come out and actually experience the areas that are opened up to the public, kind of helps them build an appreciation for the areas that they're here to visit. So when folks come out and they come to an area as beautiful as the Hocking Hills, they can see the impact that they can leave behind, whether it be with littering or hiking off trail a little ways. They can see if they don't hike off trail in our areas with habitat restorations, that the wildlife and the plant life can actually have a chance to thrive and become more wilderness-like. So it is kind of a double-edged sword. It can also be detrimental in a way where if we have a lot of visitors, sometimes there's too many in one spot and folks will try to go around bigger crowds, and that can cause more damage to the environment that they're here, visiting. So when visitors come to the park and they hike on our many trails that have been opened up for 80 to 100 years, a lot of folks may think that just walking on the one path, they're not really leaving an impact. However, hiking around, even if it's just, for a short little distance, it is very easy to accidentally step on some plant life or some wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife that actually utilizes the main trails that are around. So hiking in general, it does leave a little bit of an impact. But as a organization and the state parks, statewide, when they built the trails, they actually took a long time to figure out exactly where they can place the trails that would leave the less amount of impact. So as you're hiking through and you notice the trails that have the paint glazes on the trees or the fencing alongside it or the rock walls, those areas have been designated for a reason. They go around the sensitive plants and around the sensitive wildlife to help you kind of keep track that this is a good place to hike. The areas that do not have those markings or those fencings, those areas you're more likely going to make a huge impact on hiking on those areas, just because over time, the more and more people hike on those spots, they're actually crippling the life that grows below the soil there. So as you hike around, just kind of be mindful of what's underfoot. Even if it is, you kind of glance down at the ground every now and then. You may miss something if you don't look down at the ground. Even if you are hiking in an area that's been hiked on for years and years to come and previous, there is the potential that you could make a small impact or even a huge impact by removing that wildlife. So there are some areas that have been closed off completely to the public. One of those areas is a very famous spot, the Lower Falls here at Old Man's Cave. The cave that is below the Lower Falls, where the waterfall comes down, there's actually a recessed cave that goes behind that. Back in, I want to say it was the 70s, there was a massive rock fall. And there's a giant boulder sitting right next to that waterfall that was actually a part of the roof of that cave. After it fell, a lot more rock falls have occurred. And over time, you can never predict when those rock falls are going to occur. That rock actually blocks the view, so if something were to happen where a rock did come down and say it would hurt somebody, you might not even know that they're back there. So we've closed that off mainly for safety, but another cool thing about closing that area off is the fact that it's very sandy, very, very loose sand back behind there. It's not been compacted by people. And because of that, our snapping turtles, our box turtles, small reptiles and things like that will go behind that waterfall. They will dig in that loose sand and they will actually lay their eggs. And then as the eggs turn and they get ready to hatch, it's a good substrate for the babies to come out of and make it right into the creek itself. So by staying out of that area, we're actually helping the population of the turtles and the reptiles, like the snakes and things, kind of thrive in this area, in areas where a lot of their habitat has been kind of removed just from compaction from the feet and all the visitors that come to visit the park.
Plants are another thing that's affected by people. People and their pets can accidentally bring in invasive or harmful plants into an ecosystem. From your shoes or in between the paw pads of your furry friends, you may accidentally bring in weeds or other things.
So we have a nature preserve in our area where pets are not permitted. And that is mainly because of the wildlife and the things that are found within that area. An example is Conkle's Hollow. That's our state nature preserve. No pets are allowed in there mainly because we have gotten occurrences of black bear. And when you bring a pet in, the barking and stuff like the disruption that they can cause can actually scare off that wildlife. So it's very beneficial to save areas with no pets. Nature preserves are also great places for scientific studies. And when you bring a pet in, not that they mean it, they can bring in invasive seeds attached to their fur, generally in their paws. And when they bring in those invasive seeds, as we talked earlier, invasives can displace the natives. And in the preserves, there's generally something really cool being saved there. If you bring in the invasive species, it can displace the rare, endangered native species. So keeping pets out kind of helps control the amount of invasive species. It also helps to protect the scientific biological makeup in the soil. So Division of Natural Areas and Preserves, they will sometimes do studies in the soil still to find out the microorganisms and things that live in the soil. And as they test that, sometimes they will find that it's been disrupted by just urine or, the other stuff that gets left behind from pets. So keeping pets out of there helps protect the very, very microscopic life found in the soil of those areas.
The water can be affected by people as well. There's no swimming, no wading signs for a reason, to protect you and the water. People can bring in foreign bacteria or things like sunscreen into the water. It can make a huge impact on the sensitive creatures which find homes in the streams. There's fish that need extremely clean waters to survive. When people swim in the streams and pools, it is easy to contaminate the waters with the residues from sunscreen, bug sprays, and detergent on clothing. Wading in the water stirs up the siltation and dirt on the stream floor and makes it hard for these fish to filter water through their gills. It is also too easy to smash the nests or beds where these fish lay their eggs. This makes it less likely for successful hatches and can diminish population numbers rapidly. But beyond that, some places just aren't safe to swim in. It could be unsafe for kids, or waterfalls can be powerful enough to injure someone.
So the Hocking Hill State Park, we do on average get about 3 million visitors a year. That being said, those 3 million visitors bring along 6 million feet. And studies have shown that it only takes 7 feet to make a trail. So that's 3.5 people. If we get 3 million visitors, it's very easy to create trails that aren't supposed to be there in the areas that they have been, developed. When folks go off trail and they start working new trails into the surrounding areas, they actually can compact the soil so much that it will cut off the oxygen flow to very large trees that have been around for over 100 years. And very quickly they can kill off that tree just by kind of suffocating the root system. And in doing that, it kind of creates an opportunity, and it also takes away opportunities for the wildlife and the ecosystem within that area. So when hiking and you find a trail that is kind of beaten ground, and around it there's a lot of wildflowers and ferns and things like that, just kind of remember that in that area where all those ferns and wildflowers are, and then you have that bare ground, at one point that was covered in a blanket of those plants, which kind of makes it that wilderness serene area that folks want to kind of get away to. So not only does it impact the trees, it'll impact the little plants that grow as well, and that in turn will take away from the wildlife. because those ferns and those wildflowers provide a home for the smaller creatures that make up the majority of the areas that you're here to visit. When it comes to estimating about how many people come off trail on a 1 out of 10 kind of deal, I would say probably about 3 out of 10 folks will go off trail, either to avoid crowds or to find something new and discover their own unique area. Hiking at the Hocking Hills, we do have designated trails that will bring you to the more interesting and beautiful sites. So when folks see other folks going around different trail areas and things like that, they already know that they're on their way to something beautiful on the designated path. Most of those areas we try to get that under control by putting in fencing, post and cable. We'll put up a lot of interpretive signage that will kind of explain why we have to close that area off. We try to outline the trail and make it very obvious as to where you're supposed to be versus where you shouldn't probably be. Most of those areas have been outlined for safety or because there's really cool plant life or animal life that occurs there, or it's to the point where it's about to be completely destroyed and we're trying to save what little is left of it. When it comes to the animal populations and the historical occurrences of them, I'm not 100% sure on the actual numbers that have been recorded. However, I can tell you from experience that yes, it may seem like it's a barren area in spots, but that's not always the case. The park does close after dark, and that gives those animals a chance to come in and actually utilize the area that they like to come in and get drinks of water. They'll come in and forage the plant life and things like that. So basically the wildlife has learned to work hand in hand with the large crowds that we get.
On the other hand, the presence of people can easily scare off animals. It may even displace them from their preferred habitat and force them to use some of their energy preserve to get away. Animals also have heightened stress responses due to human activity. Many animals like to stay far away from humans, their vehicles, and especially their pets.
The main thing that you can do to help leave no trace, whatever you bring into the park, whether it be a water bottle, it be, a plastic bag to put your gloves in if it's cold or whatever, those things that you bring in with you, keep track of them. Bring a bag with you, like a backpack or, a purse or something that you can shove that down in. And as you leave, in the parking areas, there are big, large dumpsters for folks to dispose of all their trash and their waste. So they don't have to drag that around with them all the way back to wherever they came from to visit. Another thing that you can do to leave no trace is to just remain on that designated path. Yes, the Hocking Hills State Park does have a trail law, but that is also a very good thing to have, just to kind of help preserve the wildlife, preserve the plant life, and keep that wilderness feel, present here at the park.
As Brittney said, Hocking Hills has a trail law where they require people to stay on marked trails, stay out of the water, off rocks and plants, and prohibit taking things home. They have also rerouted trails to be one way to improve safety for everyone. All of these reasons are why it's so important to remember to leave no trace. Leave no trace means that when you're out hiking, try to make it like you were never there. You can do this by planning ahead before you go, walk only on the main trails, don't leave trash behind, don't take anything out with you, respect the wildlife, and be considerate of others. You can also help keep the environment safe by informing others about Leave No Trace so that everyone is doing their part.
So when visitors come to the Hocking Hills State Park, they still can help protect the beauty that's here to see. Basically, when you come hiking, just pick out one path that you want to take, figure out your trail beforehand, so that way you know where you're going. You can hike on through on that designated path with the blazes and the markers that kind of help guide you through and outline that trail. Bring a trash bag with you if you plan on bringing a picnic, so you can remove your litter and the rubbish that gets left behind from that. And basically just make sure you're coming here to have fun. Bring along a good pair of hiking boots that are waterproof so you can walk right through that mud if you find it, because walking around mud puddles and stuff like that can cause the trails to become overly widened, which can remove the delicate plant life and things around in that ecosystem. So prepare for wet feet by bringing stuff to keep your feet dry, and bring a trash bag to remove all that litter and stuff that you might leave behind if you weren't prepared for that. And just remember to stay on the designated trail while you're visiting.